Every Friday, we do a segment called Friday with Friends, where I invite an interesting friend on to talk about their life or their career. Many of you watching will know Simone Del Rosario. She and I worked together very closely when I was at Fox 13, covering government and politics and the riots in 2020. Well, Simone has since moved on from Fox 13 as well and transitioned into covering the economy, which is obviously a very fascinating subject matter right now. So I invited her on the show to talk about what she's been up to. Simone, welcome to Fridays with Friends. How are you?
Thank you. I'm so good. I'm so happy to be with you.
Do you miss Seattle? How's the Big Apple?
I miss Seattle every time someone's talking about how good the weather is. A friend just asked if she could lay on my roof in our Seattle house this weekend. Apparently, it's supposed to be nice. So I miss it in times like that, but I love New York. And, Seattle's home, but this is a really good adventure right now.
Yeah, I went a few months ago to New York and got to see you. I mean, I really went to see your dog, but I saw you in the process of seeing Rookie. But New York, it gets a bad rap, but honestly, I just found it nicer to walk around in than Seattle, sort of in terms of the disorder thing. I mean, what do you make of some of the headlines about New York? How realistic is like the crime situation there?
Right. I mean, I think I get a lot of questions from friends about what the crime is like and, oh, do you even ride the subway? I ride the subway multiple times a day, by the way. I'm not saying that there haven't been bad things that happen on my line, but I find it to be relatively safe. I get on the subway, I get to work, I come home, and I do this every day. As you said, love walking around the city. I mean, it's just such a great city to be walking around, a lot of energy. And as far as comparing it to Seattle, I find that the homelessness really isn't in your face here. It's not as much as you would see in Seattle, I think. So, for whatever policies that the different cities have, I find New York to be a relatively safe place. And if you were to ever run into trouble, there's always people around. So that's nice too.
Yeah, it's like New York's so big that you do have a crime issue, but it's spread out more than Seattle, where it's like all on two city blocks and very in your face. And, New York has the right to shelter law, which makes it, I think, a little bit different because people aren't on the streets as visible. But anyway, so obviously we used to be on Fox 13, Q13 together. What have you been doing since then? Tell people about this gig of yours.
Right. So I took the opportunity to move to New York. I have always wanted to be here, and I'm a business correspondent for this great startup called Straight Arrow News. And I came on before we had really launched the platform in general. And the mission alone of just like, we're going to give you this unbiased network that there are too many news networks out there that are, really leaning to one side or the other. And there's not as much out there for people who are looking for straight down the middle news. So we like to tell it like it is and let viewers decide for themselves what the information is. And so I just thought that was kind of a dream to be able to do that, sign on to that kind of mission, and to come to New York City and live here and talk about business, which I don't think a lot of people know, but even going up through school, I double concentrated in broadcast and business journalism. So this is really a part of my heart. And I love to be able to explain so many different topics about, trying to make it easy for people to understand. And I think that there's no more important topic than finance for people to feel more accessible in this space. So I love being able to break it down like that.
It's also just a hell of a time, though, to be covering business and the economy with everything going
I
on.
call it job security for me.
Yes, so job security is a good way to look at it, but it's fascinating how political things get and how you can look at the same situation like, let's say, gas prices, and depending on what side of the aisle you're on, you find different people to blame entirely. So I guess, how do you navigate when your mission is to just give it to people straight? How do you navigate the inherent kind of politics that come into issues like that, like gas prices and inflation?
Well, we don't ignore those opinions, right? We don't ignore where those things are coming from. It's a matter of cutting through the political BS, if you will, and explaining to people exactly what's happening. And it's the same thing with inflation. I mean, I think it's very catchy to call it Biden inflation, but like, whose responsibility is it now to bring inflation down? And that really comes down to actions that the Fed can take at this point. There's very little the president of the United States is going to be able to do at this point to bring down inflation in the immediate term. So trying to explain to people how things actually work. I think something that got really political too was when the Q2 numbers came out for GDP. and they were negative for the second quarter in a row. And it was all this recession talk. And I remember doing a piece, and it's like, at the end of the day, however you feel about what a recession is colloquially or, officially, whether it's the NBER that classifies a recession, does it matter if people are hurting? Does it matter what you call it at this point? Does it matter if it actually qualifies as a recession? If American families are struggling to fill up their cars, are struggling to feed their families, like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what really matters versus people yelling at each other across the political aisle.
Exactly. And that's the exact message we had on Divided, which was basically like, at the end of the day, your best barometer for how the economy is doing is how American families are doing. And you just see people trying to get political points by being able to label things X, Y, or Z. But, I think especially in an important election year, with the midterms coming up, there is a desire to know, okay, how did gas prices get to this point? How did inflation get so bad? And so on things like that, I mean, can you find clear culprits, with inflation, for example? And there's the talk about all the spending that Democrats passed during the pandemic and as we were getting out of the pandemic. How much does that contribute to what Americans are seeing, in the cost at the grocery store, et cetera?
The stimulus is certainly a factor, but remember, the stimulus did start under Republican administrations, and this was a bipartisan effort to put this money into the economy. And we're talking about this now in hindsight, right? If we could go back and change the way that we responded to the pandemic and how much we put into the economy to recover from that very extreme, very quick recession, maybe as a country, we would have done things a little bit differently. But inflation was starting to pick up anyway because we had all this stimulus. And then you just add more stimulus on top of it, and it kind of continues to tumble. Something that people don't talk about is that right now there are certain states that have parties or control in both parties that are passing other types of stimulus for their residents. Who knew? Giving money away is a very popular thing for voters, whether you're a Republican voter or a Democrat voter. So we see governors from both parties right now in states that are still putting money out into the economy. And as someone who, does this every day, my only question is, really, did we not learn from this? Did we not learn that this economic stimulus really put us in a position where spending got out of control? Unfortunately, we're really at this point where the Fed is looking at the economy and trying to cripple it in a way to bring down inflation. And it really comes down to saying, we're going to have to bring pain to households so that they stop spending, so that demand goes down, so that inflation goes down. And that's tough. That's really tough to tell people that we're going to put the country into a recession, essentially. They say they want a soft landing, but it's becoming more and more unlikely that people are going to lose their jobs because we need people to stop spending so that prices will go down.
And that's why, when the Biden administration came out and they said, hey, we're going to go forward with student debt forgiveness, from a business reporter perspective, what aspects of that decision did you focus on?
Specifically, that it's not going to solve the problem of student debt. This is a one-time shot that, sure, is going to give relief to millions of Americans. I would say that the majority of people who are seeing their student loans go away, or at least part of it going away, they haven't been making payments for 2.5 years now. So it's not like all of a sudden they have this student loan payment that they get to shuck out into the economy. So it's not going to have as big of an impact as people think. And I think all of the analyses say the same thing, that inflation prices might go up 0.1%, 0.2%. It has very little effect on it, but it's not addressing the core root of the problem. So that's been the biggest thing from a financial perspective, that this is a one-time shot and we still have a lot of work to do because borrowers are hurting.
When you talk about business reporting and reporting on the economy, talking about the Fed and interest rates and the impact of student debt and what causes inflation, these are all highly complex issues that have a variety of contributing factors. How do you, I don't want to say dumb it down, but you and I have been in news for a long time. And the most effective people are people who can relay the necessary information without treating viewers like they're stupid, but also understand that not everybody gets economic issues and business issues to the extent that someone like you does. So how do you find that balance of, being able to relay information to viewers, but also kind of keeping it simple?
Well, look, I'm not reporting for CNBC, where if I were, I would be catering my reports to avid investors, right? I'm trying to reach that general audience that may not be as comfortable talking about finance as people who are actively investing in the market. And so my biggest goal is just to get people to a point of understanding, to get people to fear these terms, to fear these themes a little bit less. If you can understand something, then you can wrap your head around it. It becomes a little less scary. This is a scary time in the economy. I, feel for that, and I experienced that myself. But if you can understand what's happening a little bit more, it makes the boogeyman aspect of it go away. And so that's always my goal and my approach walking into it. And luckily, I'm, surrounded by people on my team who aren't financial reporters. And so I turn to them. Does this make sense to you? And can then we put this out? And does this have, the effect that I'm looking for?
Yeah, I was curious kind of what the barometer is for that in terms of, because we've heard a lot of organizations pop up, news orgs over the last couple of years that are like, we're going to be straight down the middle news. I look at News Nation, for instance, which now they're being criticized for maybe going too far to the right, which I don't know who's making that judgment. But what is your guys' barometer for whether you're kind of fulfilling your mission to be kind of straight down the middle?
I think that it's less about both sidesism or anything, and just being critical of all sides. So really taking that critical spotlight on something that would be considered a left issue, something that would be considered a right issue, and making sure that we're being fair in that. And we have these conversations every morning. And we have a team that's very diverse in their political thoughts and backgrounds. And that's exciting too, is to be able to have those conversations, because newsrooms like to say that they have it, but I would say that we really do have it in our newsroom. And I think it's important right now to be having these conversations together and coming up with stories and angles that we all feel are going to benefit the public.
Yeah, that's what newsrooms totally fall short of. They're looking to diversify, which I think is important. I don't think you should have a staff of all like white people who grew up upper middle class, but also, you need to have diversity of thought and diversity of economic background to be able to, I think, really serve your viewers the best. And so I'm glad to hear that you guys have focused on that and saying, yeah, we want diversity of thought. We want people with different opinions. How do you guys reach, how do most people consume Straight Arrow?
So it's straightarrownews.com. We have obviously our website, and then you can find us on all of the social media channels. So we are a digital first platform. You and I are both now post TV, and it's a fun space to be because you can really stretch your muscles a little bit more in the space. So obviously Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, we have a big, or TikTok following. So we do a lot of different things across all of the social media platforms, and then find us on our website, straightarrownews.com.
Speaking of that quickly, as we kind of wrap up, post TV, the last time I think a lot of viewers in Seattle would have seen you, you were in the thick of it in the 2020 riots. That was a really challenging time physically and mentally for both of us out covering these things. What is it like to make that transition from, the climate that you were in reporting in Seattle to now focusing on business and the economy?
As complicated as the economy is, it's been a breath of fresh air to get out of that environment and to get out of basically trauma reporting for a really long period of time. So this was a conscious decision on my part to come and do this. I didn't just fall into this. I was looking for something where I could live a better life. I was consumed by the news in Seattle, and I know that you were as well. And, not just on a personal, like, oh, I couldn't stop watching it, but like we gave everything. And now I find a lot of purpose in what I'm doing now. And I did find a lot of purpose in local news and working in Seattle and working for that market. And I think we did a lot of really good work. But I'm loving the balance now.
Yeah, balance is really important, and you get to do what you love, but also, not get, assaulted in riots, which is always, not get mobbed by angry crowds, which is always a plus. Well, Simone, it's so nice to see you, and you just look so bright and vibrant and happy, and your dog's doing good, and your husband's doing well.
I don't know if you heard him in the background. He decided that our interview was a good time to start playing with a toy. But yeah, everything's great. We always have our roots still in Seattle. I know people think I kind of just took off, but Daniel still works out there in Puyallup, and we have this lovely little life here in New York as well. So it's been good. It's been really good, and I love to consider you a friend that I get to keep forever, and Q13 gave us that.
Yeah, we both managed to survive Seattle media, at least for the time being. All right, Simone, thanks for being on Fridays with Friends.
Thanks for having me.